Welcome to this week's edition of The Plain Truth. I'm Plain, your host, and each week we go into mysteries and topics of interest. And this week we have a special guest, Paul Muir, who's quite well known for his work with orbs and energy as a topic and has an interesting book. Paul, are you there?
Yes, I am, yeah.
Okay, thanks. We also have joining us some members, Bob, Neil, and Oolong. Bob, you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Neil?
Yeah, I'm here.
And Oolong.
Hey, guys.
Hey, well, let's get going. Straight to the point. So, Paul, thanks again for joining us. We do appreciate it. And I guess we ought to just start at the beginning. What are orbs? I mean, for those who don't know what they are.
Well, that is actually the probably the most difficult
big question, right?
Yeah. It's a difficult one because you have to see everything in context. Like an orb is part of its environment, and there are two. I like to give an analogy of what an orb is. If you imagine, it's a vehicle of distribution of energy, matter, and consciousness. Now, these things become difficult for the mind to even comprehend. And an orb is capable of carrying anything in those terms. It is generally a massless thing. But some of the descriptions of massless actually have spin and charge. So an orb is the 96% of the universe that we don't really understand much of. Our ancient ancestors called it prana or chi, and it is the stuff that coalesces to bring mass into existence. So within that, the orb transmutates into various different forms. And so this, like an orb, can be a wave or a particle. So it's a very difficult thing for anyone to grasp, I suppose. I mean, the Hermetica talks of the primordial substance and its transmutations. And to me, that description of that primordial substance and its transmutations is what I've discovered in the orb bar wave process. It is the stuff that is massless that brings material into reality. We can call it the ether, we can call it the orb bar wave, we can call it chi, prana, life forces. Alfred Russel Wallace called it. But what it's driven by is actually the even bigger question that is difficult to comprehend. I suppose most would call it the collective consciousness of the creator, or just collective consciousness, if you want to call it that. That's fine. I'm not sure that makes it any clearer plain, though, does it?
Well, it's a good start. I suppose one question I have is it only related to living things, or is it really everything, the creation of mass, rocks or chairs?
Everything. I mean, there are two aspects to it. There is a field of energy. We can call them, if you want to call the field of energy ley lines on the earth, I'm quite happy with that. But there's fields of energy which link all the planets together and every single system together. So there's smaller fields and there's greater fields. And from these fields of energy, this energy moves on. And I can't be certain, but is either energized by it or created by it. The intersections of the fields of energy create this orb effect.
So I have a question. you have a book, Orbs, Energy, and Myths.
Yeah.
And in that, you talk about a common pattern or an important pattern that looks like something from the I Ching. And you talk about the I Ching a bit.
Yeah.
Could you elaborate on that a little bit?
Well, you see, a lot of people, the shape-changing dragon or the shape-changing energy of the I Ching, and everyone thinks it's some sort of a thing out of imagination rather than reality. To me, that is reality. I'll give you an example. In this video on my YouTube, there's a number of videos. When we were filming the bars, now the bars, you've seen those bars in the I Ching, haven't you?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
You've seen the bars. Well, these bars, you've obviously seen some people who've done programs on rods, haven't you?
Yes. Uh-huh.
So these bars are the rods, basically, and the rods are the rods of the I Ching. And they move on energy fields, and they come in from certain directions. So we spend a series of time filming at a location in a car park by Tinnacoid Woods. And we'd slow down, and they would move in pairs together. Sometimes these rods would divide. We'd use a black background and drop, right? Mm-hmm. So these bars now are real bars of energy which open and close. And they move on energy fields which are orientated to north, south, east and west and whatever. To gain enough data on that would take a lifetime in itself. We saw the pattern. We recognized the pattern. There's a great one of a bar dividing on the stone circle, where the bar comes down in a single form and opens to create two bars of the I Ching. This energy, right, we were filming in the forestry, this is probably about 2002, maybe 2004, somewhere around there, probably 2004 more likely. And I was, you've obviously seen some of the videos where we work with energy.
Yes.
Have you seen any of those?
Yes.
And what you've got is, I got to remember which hand it is. The left hand, one of these rods come in and attach to my left hand, and sits into, it comes into the wrist of the left hand, and one of the bars is attached to the left hip. As it enters into the left hip, it is absorbed into the wrist. Now, until we see this energy again, we're not going to know this. The camera picks it up. These bars also enter, these are chakra points now, or energy entry points, which, into the right ankle, in twos vertically. So we have data on this. It's not the greatest data. It's not, but these places correspond. Now, you may have heard of the Iceman called Otzi.
Yes. Uh-huh.
These correspond to, he's got about 96 tattoos on him. But some of the tattoos, particularly the one on the left wrist and the hip and on the shoulder and on the ankles, correspond to what videos we've got of where the bars enter into a human being. Mm-hmm. So this is prana now, or chi, entering an individual. It happens to everybody, not just me. It just so happens that we spend a long time filming everything. We understood how fast these bars were moving and how slow. I suppose I should give you some analysis of how we collected the data. It was on digital tape. We would film for 15 minutes. To review that tape would take an hour because we had to slow it down to 4 times its normal speed to get the film working slow enough so you can see the speed of the rods. These rods also respond to magnetic fields and slow down whenever there's a high energy fields around. This is how we formulated the orb in space and orb on magnetic field theory. So basically this stuff enters the body. Now in Otzi, in the tattoo that he has in the wrist, there are high levels of quartz crystals. Now, the scientists reckon that the quartz that is tattooed into his wrist. Now, you imagine now having a quartz bracelet on, or you're having quartz tattooed into your wrist. This to me is an absolute certainty that this was a deliberately tattooing into the energy points quartz crystal, as they were using quartz crystal and crystal lattices of the sedimentary stones of the megaliths. So they were fully aware of what the properties of quartz were in terms of how they were using it to amplify energy. In fact, go on, yeah.
Well, a question I have with this is with the orbs in general is, are you of the view that it's basically a prana positive life force, or could it also be a negative force? I mean, did you ever look into Wilhelm Reich's work with orgone
orgone generators?
Well, that, and also his creation of like living matter from dirt, the bions, and then his for example, he was especially concerned with nuclear energy because it created an incredible negative effect that practically killed the people in his lab.
Yeah.
It like poisoned a 10-mile area or something like that. And that was, in other words, they could magnify negative stuff as well as positive stuff. And so I was kind of wondering can there be negative orbs, I guess is what I'm asking.
Well, I think these things are, the positive and negative. It's a perspective, I think. I struggle. I see it as a creation in harmony and balance. And yes, you can, by fiddling with these things, alter the balance of it. And there is a probability that Wilhelm Reich could alter the balance of these things by understanding, what he was doing was separating energy, laying down layers of things which would separate. I believe it's more like a quantum tunneling effect that he was creating, but I'm not sure about the negative effects because I obviously haven't read enough about his research, to be honest.
Well, that's okay. It's just that for health reasons, you could essentially take the life force with alternating layers and of basic substances, wood, dirt, that kind of thing, and accumulate it, and it would definitely help with healing. And I've used it, and I recommend it. You can also use it for other things like just general health. But in their tests, they definitely had the ability to take negative things and make them worse. And I was just curious if there are such things. And by negative, I mean health damaging.
Yeah.
By the way, gets into another issue, which is are orbs more common in pristine wilderness areas like the forest near you as compared to with, let's say, downtown London?
I think that these things are carriers of information.
Okay.
So that the shell of it, in their nature, they would be different. So whereas you get a lot of wilderness and you get a lot of trees and whatever, then you will have what I would say would be the natural forces, the natural orbs, within a wilderness area. Does that make sense?
Sure.
So I used to do a bit of part-time bar work in the rock concerts in Great Britain, in London, and where you get lots of people, you get lots of orbs, lots and lots of them. They're mainly the opaque ones. They're not like the primary orb, which has got the very, very strong white core. It reflects light as a white core. It has its the red, orange, yellow, indigo, violet, but it's split down a central line. So you have the leading edge bringing in the one set of colors of the rainbow, and a trailing edge. Now these are the spinning orbs bringing in the other sets of the electromagnetic spectrum. So that you got a difference. So you could say, well, you do get more orbs in the city where people are, but they're different. The absolute healing energy, or the fundamental stuff, is in nature itself.
Hey, Paul. It's Oolong here. I was just wondering what your thoughts were as far as when we breathe, are we actually inhaling and intaking this energy, and does that help us heal, or is it basically the basic life energy that we're intaking? I know from the Taoist perspective, they had all kinds of exercises designed for breath regulation, believing that the qi was coming into our body through the breath. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I would say that it enters through energy points because I have data for that. I would suggest that is absolutely correct. That it would enter through the air that we breathe itself. It's a little bit off. You probably haven't seen any of the images of the blood cells under the microscope video footage that I've put up on YouTube. But there was an invention about 50 years ago. I think Royal Rife was involved with some part of that. It was called a stomatoscope, and it was an infrared microscope. And in that, you could view a third part that they found, which was in the, as I say, the infrared spectrum. And these look incredibly like orbs in blood. And we know that if you use an infrared night vision goggles, you can see the orbs in the sky, although people mistake them for other things. And in the infrared spectrum in the microscope, you can see what the inventor of the stomatoscope called stomatids, I think it was. The ancients, I think, called them nadis. And I think that the orbs are in blood as well. So,
one more follow-up to that. I know a lot of the orb pictures you took and showed in your book were in the forest and in those pristine areas that Plane discussed.
Yeah.
That's also interesting because the Taoists have a lot of Qigong practices that involve exchanging energy with trees.
Yeah. I was talking to Neil. It's great you bring this up. I was talking to Neil about it. And, I mean, you know, it's bringing tears to my eyes because it's, sometimes you can feel the fields of the energy from these plants and trees. And sometimes I spend a long time in there, and I spend too much time, to be honest. I should be interacting with people a bit more. Cause I can be quite funny at times, you know, we'll have a crack, like, you know, but, I still find it more comfortable in woodland, you know. And, there was one day when I was walking towards this small, sapling. I can't remember which one it was. And it was like it was saying to me, touch me. And you touched it, and you felt the flow from the plant into you, and it was like spine chilling. It was truly a beautiful moment. And I spotted another tree, and it was these are saplings now, and I was just looking at it, and I walked up to that, and it just ran through me. It was like being plugged into the grid. You know, it was just I've had these experiences before, but you know, these two experiences in the same day within 10 meters of each other were astounding to me. And that is the flow of the life force from one thing to another.
That's fascinating. Thanks, Paul.
You know, it's there's a boy now who's he was one of my son's friends when he was little, and we're talking little children now, because we used to go camping. I'd take him fishing and stuff like that, and my wife is compassionate. She's won awards for her compassion that she shows to children with special needs and stuff like that. Anyway, this one boy, I said to him, go outside. I said, do you see the leaf there? And I pointed to the bush outside my front garden. And I said, hold your hand on the end of it and just rock your hand back and forth, and you'll feel the energy pushing out the end of the leaf. And he came back into me and he said, I could feel it. I could feel it like a breeze in the palm of his hand. Now, this is a, maybe 8-year-old child. And he's now studying Cambridge. You know what I mean? And I'm thinking he will still remember that moment, because people in my street, know the healing work that I've done, and the energy work. Healing is not a good word. It implies all you are is a converter of energy, and so he's going to be carrying that into his future, and that to me is quite exciting.
Paul.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I'd like to go back to the quartz that was embedded in the Iceman's skin.
Yeah.
Do you think that was done either to attract the energy or to cause him to feel the energy when he encountered it?
Well, he was. I forget. It was about 3,100, wasn't it? I think he was about the time when everything started to fall apart for these ancient shaman. I mean, I'll call them shaman, but that's not a good description, because the modern shaman is far removed from these ancient people who were in connection with personally, I don't think they needed the drugs that the modern shaman need. I think that they were in true communion with nature and its energy forces. And as those forces started to disappear, because the energy now is emptying out of our solar system, it's like a bath. The energy that was in when the energy workers were at the top of their game is now flowing out of their universe, and they have to map it into geoglyphs, petroglyphs, all sorts of things to leave the mounds started to be built. They were trying to hold on to the energy that was running away. And I think that yes. I think that he was, over the generations, they were probably losing their energetic gifts, and they wanted to try and hold on to those by adding quartz into their body system, probably. If you had to ask me. I mean, I found a square block of what looks like machined quartz buried in a stone circle, and I used it with a dowsing technique to find it. I meant to return to it. I was with a doctor of geology at the time, and I said to him, if we follow this energetic field, we'll find paired split stones, which that's another topic. And of course, we found this square block of quartz, and it wasn't from the locality. The geologist confirmed that. So, they were into quartz, and they understood the properties of quartz. The bedding planes of the megaliths are always vertical. They did this deliberately. This wasn't chance. It'll be dismissed by modern day scientists as a byproduct of, it just happened to go into him when he was tattooing himself with soot, and there happened to be quartz in there. That's what the scientists are saying about it. But I believe that to be deliberate, And
hey, Paul. Paul, I've got a little question with that. So, in your work, is there any relationship between orbs and crystals?
Because I think naturally occurring in sedimentary rock is a crystal lattice, and some of the semiconductor properties that we're now discovering are part and parcel of what the ancients understood as a normal reaction of quartz.
Well, we know I guess it's like the Egyptian wands of Horus, like a copper filled with quartz, that kind of thing. There are different ways of kind of combining copper and quartz to try to get, I guess you would say, healthy energy.
Yeah.
Have you seen, does that seem to attract these orbs, or do you have any idea?
Right. In the book, there's a sequence of about 50 photographs. I can explain. The stones had an aura over them. Halfway through, or a number of photographs into that sequence of photographs, we put our hands on the stones. The stones stopped glowing. We took our hands off. The stones started to glow. We put our hands back on them, and we're taking photographs now all the time. And they stopped glowing again, so they started glowing. Now, people were saying, "Oh, it's flashback," but when you show them the sequence of them, they don't understand it. And what I came to the conclusion that there is a fire. It's a bit like a piezoelectric process, but what's creating the pressure in the stone? Because at the tips of the stone, they were firing out orbs and bars. And that is on my, in one of the videos where I show it. So that we only had that once occur, although we had it occur on video about 2 or 3 times, where the tips of the stones are firing out this energy. So when you walk around these megaliths in a certain way, and we used to invite a small group of people to walk this one megalithic circle with us, and we would clear away any energy blockages of those stones, because when people walk through them and around them, they take off negative energy, and it's held in the stone and deliver the quartz energy to that individual. I know it's a little bit fanciful, but we've taken people, when we've walked them through the standing stones, they feel the pushes, and it pushes them back and forth like a physical force. It's a shame that we can't demonstrate that, in words. But we used to walk people who were interested. Some of the British druids came with us at some time.
Oh, can I ask one more thing before we go too far?
Yeah.
Okay. You mentioned that some of the orbs are more opaque when you're around large groups of people. Yeah. On page 20 of your book, there's the most fascinating photo to me that it's a woodland scene and it's getting dark, but there are 2 orbs that have lit up the background as if they were night vision goggles or something like that. Would you comment on that?
Well, yeah, it's been a long time since I've shown the book, but was it like a sort of like a red sheen over something or a blue sheen over something?
To me, it was just, I didn't see anything like that, but it's just that as you're looking at those orbs, the background behind them is lit up as if it was daylight.
Yeah, I can't, because it's some time since I've written the book, I can't, I'd have to refer back to the book, because it's, I've seen over probably a million photographs, and I got a feel for things. There were some really odd things that occurred during this time, right? In halfway through a sequence of photographs, we would get like as though light disappeared. We'd take a photograph and light would disappear, and the obvious conclusion to most of these people or critics of the work would say, "Oh, your batteries are failing on your computer, on your camera." And what you would get back is you would get a totally black image. And it was like as though some energetic force was stealing light. Now you could say, oh, well, either that or your batteries are going flat, but then the following photograph would be back to its normal resolution and the flash would be working. So it's either an interference with the background energy. Basically, we have fluctuations in energy everywhere. And sometimes if your magnetic field is stronger, you will get more light reflected back off it. So it could be the flux of the magnetic field itself. I came up with a theory that in space there would be these magnetic fields, and the effect which is described as gravitational lensing is nothing more than magnetic reflection or light reflecting off energetic fields. And they found some of those now with the recent Voyager. So what you have is an energetic field which is transferring particles in and out of our solar system, but across the universe as well. And what it will do is when it's switched on or has an energy flow through it, it will reflect more light back to it. And it could be that is the effect.
Paul, I have a question.
Yeah.
Do you think, I guess what I took away from your book is that it seems like when there's more moisture in the atmosphere, we seem to get more orbs?
Yeah.
Why would that be?
Well, it's something that I was talking to Neil about this evening, and it's very apt you should bring this up. And I tore my hair out for years. Oh, it's rain, until we used mirrors and stuff like that. I'm not going to labour the point of what the implication of using mirrors and reflected images and how the reflected image will look different. But it was proven that what was being reflected from something to a mirror, out of the mirror, and the image was changed by the rain on the mirror, so that it was basically a physical object. So I struggled, it's too complicated to go into really. I struggled with this concept for ages. And for years I wanted to collect the theory about how rain forms in the atmosphere is that you have a dust particle in the atmosphere. That dust particle forms a nucleus for rain. For condensation. The condensation occurs around the dust particle, and then the particles of rain fall. And I always wanted to collect those particles to test that theory out, because to me, the raindrop is formed around charge, or around, let's call it a charged orb. So anyway, for years that I theorized that the particles coming in from space would have an influence on the weather on our planet. As our magnetic field weakens, more particles from space come in. Some of the orbs have spin, and so they create these vortexes, which then form tornadoes or high and low pressure, the high and lows that we see in some of those greater cyclones and anticyclones. And they also, there are now publications suggesting that cosmic rays or particle from outside our solar system is actually causing rain to form. So they're rather than viewing the dust theory that causes rain, it is now transforming itself. There are only 2 or 3 publications on it at the moment. I don't publish anything. I theorize these things because I've done my study on the orb. And obviously, this is why there are more orbs present in rain, because the ionization or the charge or the orbs themselves, which are coming in from outside our solar system.
All right, that's pretty deep for me. I'm not much of a scientist, but I guess in layman's terms, could you say that the moisture is just more apt to conduct like electromagnetic energy?
I think hailstones are just formed from the charge of a sphere. The whole thing is these orbs are capable of bringing the water to the surface. Have you ever heard of my orb fugolite theory?
Could you repeat that, Paul?
The orb fugolite theory, where right. Imagine a balloon in the sky.
Okay.
Rub it on your hair.
Okay.
Right. So then, if you threw up talcum powder or whatever, it would stick to the balloon. You would be able to see it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's your orb now. It's picking up charge, and it's sucking. It can suck in dust from a dust storm. It can suck in tephra from volcanic action, which creates charge on itself. If lightning strikes that, right, then you've got yourself ball lightning. If lightning strikes and fuses the silicate or the material, let's call it talcum powder, to the surface, it will then form a stone sphere which will fall from the sky to the earth. And that happened in France last year or the year before. You know, it happened for 4 months in 1921. Have you heard the Fortean Times, is it? Charles Fort?
Charles Fort, yeah.
Well, he sent his investigators to investigate the phenomenon of these stone spheres falling from the sky. And it was around Glasson Peak's last volcanic action. I'm amazed how the Fortean Times haven't even bothered to come and talk to me about this, because their investigators couldn't find out why these things were happening. Well, I've got the explanation. I have the geological samples, which were prepared by one of my colleagues in the university where I work, confirmed by now our senior geologist, who's now retired, as a fugolite. But a spherical fugolite, which is lightning strikes silicate and it forms a fugolite, which is the shape of the electrical charge as it goes into the earth. All the sand that it hits turns to glass, or like a glass-like structure. And the inside of it's hollow. Now, the samples that I've had cut down and put on the SEM have the same structure as those structures when lightning strikes sand, only it's a round object. And therefore, the theory was, just to me proved. But
Paul, I've got a question on this, if I may.
Yeah.
So, is there I guess what you'd call a kind of a cycle? Like they have the hydrological cycle that they talk about. Is there a cycle that we can relate to? Because I'm familiar with cloud busting, which is Wilhelm Reich's creating or dispersing storms, which, in my opinion, works very, very well. And essentially, it's attracted. There's the energy in the sky that's attracted to water.
Yeah, I think there's something unique about water. I mean, it's a fluid, it's a solid, it's it's two gases mixed together. Do you know what I mean? I mean, I'm just in awe of it. I'm just in awe of it. You just look at it and you just go, I do a bit of fishing on the sea, and I've loved the sea and I've respected it. And do you know what I mean? And I think we're only just grasping, we say, oh, that's water. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? It's like,
I'm with you on this. Okay. So are there fewer orbs in very dry deserts? Do you have any idea on?
I would say that I went over to America and I filmed in about 9-10 states, I think it was. And the one differential between mainland Europe or Britain would be that there is a slight coloration difference in the Americas. They were more, the orbs that were there were pinker for some reason. Now I couldn't, these are really, this is a relearning of something that we've lost. Until people really seriously take this stuff up and come into it with an open mind. Because I came in with nothing. I didn't come in with anything, other than it was, stimulated by, couple of near-death experiences in the early 90s. And I just was wanted to ask some questions of these things. And of course, my answers came back after a lot of hard work, to be honest. I didn't create a self-fulfilling prophecy. Most orb researchers say, well, they're spirits of the dead. And whilst the soul can move in these chariots of ascension, it's typical man to say that everything is the soul of their lost beloved. You know what I mean? I think the whole thing is far bigger than the single source that most people enter the research about orbs to. They haven't looked at it. They haven't looked at the strands and the way the strands attach to trees and how they can give and receive energy. How orbs attach to the sun and deliver energy to the sun and get blasted off the sun. How the bars enter into the sun and blow off the sun. I mean, all these things are now streaming because of our weakened magnetic field or heliosphere. Everything is streaming in to fill us back up. The bath plug was pulled out when our ancient ancestors lost this energy, and now all it's going to be is refilled back up.
Well, then that leads to a question about how are things at, let's say, at the top of mountains or in the atmosphere when you're flying in an aeroplane? Can you either detect or photograph more or fewer reports?
I did a bit of photography in caves, and on the tops of buildings. I didn't, there was too much understanding trying to grasp. I mean, we filmed next to power substations, and there were peculiar things that we noticed there. There was a lot of orbs with holes in them. And if you look at the tether incident in space next to the magnetic fields or closer to the magnetic fields of space, you've got a lot of orbs with holes in them. So these, even after the 10, 20 years or whatever, these are still very early days to say. The one thing for certain is that orbs closer to magnetic fields become more abundant. I wrote to a gentleman called...
it seems to resemble a much wider strand than we'd expect.
Is it Michael Hutchinson? Have you heard of the Hutchinson effect?
John Hutchinson.
John.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I wrote to him because he was in an interview. He was talking about the magnetic mist he was making, or they were appearing when he was using the Tesla coils from the decommissioned battleships that he was in Canada, I think he was. So he was saying that these balls of light were also forming when he was using the so the magnetic mist. The book is called Orbs, Energy and Mist: The Secrets of the Ancient. So these magnetic mists, we were assuming that would be a pre-runner or form orbs. Although, again, you can't be totally certain of these things, but you get a mist and then you get a glut of orbs. So I wrote to Hutchinson and I sent him some photographs of all the different types of orbs and all the different colorations, the ones with the cutouts, the strands, parts of the sequences that we've got, the transformation from the one stage to the other of the orb. And I said to him, have you seen any of these in your laboratory? Have you ever thought of filming the Hutchinson effect with digital cameras, because you'll probably pick up, this orb phenomenon because it's proven the magnetic field theory of more orbs will be seen closer to magnetic fields or stronger electric fields. And all he wrote back to me is, God, those pictures are cool, man. So, yeah, but it's another thing, military installations, lots of high energy usage, nuclear power stations, high energy usage. The orbs pick up the charge, therefore more orbs are seen. But obviously people seem to think that they're UFOs stealing energy, uncloaking and uncloaking. But of course, what it is the orb picking up the energy because, even Neribu, which is mentioned in the Nuna Elish, sees the mist of the Tiamat. And, obviously, when the orb sends its strand out, it pulls energy into itself. And sticking a strand into the primordial substance of that creation poem creates Nerubu as a giant glowing orb.
I've got a couple of questions from this, if you don't mind. So one is, are the orbs always kind of small in size, or are they sometimes huge,
No,
like the space shuttle?
Well, I'm not sure that if you, on the front of my, some of the orbs attached to the sun, maybe about 5 times the size of the Earth, 10 times the size of the Earth.
Okay, so that makes sense. But the reason I ask that is, are you familiar with the work of Trevor James Constable and his The Critters?
Yes.
I mean, he has different books like The Cosmic Pulse of Life.
Now, was he the one who was buying up all the was it the infrared film back in the 70s?
Well, he was doing 70s? Stuff from the late 50s to, let's say, the early 80s.
That's right, yeah.
And he has these pictures in the atmosphere of huge, basically amoeba.
Yeah.
The size of jets or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, that's part of the process.
So it's possible that these some of the things you might think something's an orb, but it might actually be a large kind of amoeba creature. And I guess that also gets into the question. Some people talk about skyfish.
Yeah, skyfish with the wings. Yeah. I think what you're looking at is the 96% that's unseen that goes to make the 3% of mass. And in amongst it is there are so many different types of categories of its function, but all of it is what the ancients would have called prana, chi. Hari Krishna, isn't it? Krishna being the creator and Hari being the energy of creation. Right. And I think that there are orbs that carry souls, and they can actually carry them back to the source of where they're created. There are orbs that deliver energy to plants, and there are orbs that will participate. You can use for the process of healing to restore balance so they're biological. Most of these things are conscious. They can divide. Here's another prediction. A photon will divide itself, and that will explain the double-slit experiment eventually. Yeah?
Okay, let's go back to possible practical applications, in harnessing the orb bar energies. In particular, since they are, what you would say, making a comeback. What do you think about being able to harness these energies, particularly with the orbs creating the rain and having such a huge impact on water? Have you speculated, put it this way, on any potential uses for the orb bar energies in terms of dealing with things like Fukushima and the Pacific Ocean?
Yeah, well, it's funny you should say that. It was I was looking. I don't want to go into it too much. It's about the time dilation and how radioactive decay alters over a 24-hour period. And there is an ether theory, which was Loret's ether theory, which I believe that Alfred Russel Wallace was a believer in. And I believe that if we could tap into the opposite effect of which is created by the fluctuation over 24 hours in radioactive decay, we could use the orbs to alter the decay rates. It's a little bit difficult to explain.
Well, it's not a question of. It's not so much a question of being difficult to explain, but I mean, it's just a gut feeling with me. I'm thinking because as we've discussed earlier, about the orbs becoming so much more prevalent in so many more places. And a question of, communicating with one's mind or higher self, whatever you want to call it, about how to harness this energy, and if it is possible to use it to ameliorate radiation. I mean, Cliff High has talked about a group of people that he knows that apparently have been playing with time and altering time, which go along with what you're talking about, in decreasing or increasing the half-life. So,
I believe that there is a strong probability, which obviously hasn't been tested, that individuals who can work with this energy could alter the half-life of things, and I'm pretty sure that is a definite possibility for what I've experienced within my own healing energy work within the small group of people who have come along the journey with me at times, you know. So I understand. But I think that you could probably use. We're sold the mythology that radioactive decay rates are constant, and they're not. The radioactive decay at midday slows down, and midnight speeds up. And those statistics can be found, and that ties into probably another video I'm going to be doing on the time dilation fraud from the evidence that they hold up to prove Einstein's time dilation fraud. But there it's something that it would take a long time to explain, to be honest.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Well, what about ley lines or magnetism that we can measure easily? For example, you've probably heard of Edward Leeds-Skalnin's Coral Castle in Florida.
Yeah.
And a place like that, what kind of orb presence would you expect?
Well, I would any of these places that have a concentration of Earth field energy would have a greater abundance or a greater visual abundance of the orb bar wave phenomenon. I think that these concentrated areas of energy definitely would act like the orbs being able to pull in the energy to themselves through a charge-based basis, and therefore they would become more easily seen. It was one of the theories I was talking about, a quicker rotation of the Earth, so that the charge of the Earth increases, the magnetic field increases, and therefore we see more orbs. So that's what I've been waiting for. It's a bit slow to occur, and I may or may not see it in my lifetime. But when, the 1561 event, which occurred just after the Spora minimum, when the villages of Basel and in 1565 saw en masse thousands of orbs in the sky. And I think that as we enter a new, as our universe empties of energy, it will be refilled by the energy outside of the universe. And there is evidence coming through from Voyager now saying that they've found some of these fields which flow energy into our solar system and take spent energy out of it. But as you go back to the Coral Castle, that will then increase the energy of Coral Castle, but it'll also increase the energy of the whole Earth field. And the transformation in people, because they're living in a purified field, Dharma, there's the concept of Dharma, from the Vedas,
right,
of morality. When we live in a low energy field, we become psychotic and mental health problems occur, and we can go and bomb children in the Gaza Strip. Or we can talk to gods. I mean, Moses talked to God, or whatever he talked to, when, he told him to go and rape children. I mean, it was in the, anyone can do a search on the criticism of Moses. And he says to them after the battle, take all the males, including the male children, and kill them. And take all the females who have laid with a man and kill those, and keep the girl children who are virgins for your own use. Now, if that is not the psychosis of our Kali age, nothing is. And that is an effect of, firstly a man thinking he's talking to God. Were there two Moses? Has it been reported, right? There's a number of things that you can look at to it. But that, Tony Blair and George Bush prayed to God and God answered them. I mean, this is the psychosis of a low magnetic field. And when we lose the presence of the connection, not only to the orb-bar wave, as drawn in the rock arts and the petroglyphs and whatever, but it also makes us insane. And that is the age we live in, the Kali Yuga, and it's about to change. And there's two ways you can look at it. The linear mechanistic model is right or it's not. And that's it.
Paul, can I ask you something?
Yeah.
Do you feel like, in what you just said, that Julian James was not correct in that we have not integrated the two parts of our consciousness into one mind again yet? In other words, it's still separated?
Oh, we're definitely separated. I mean, if let's say, for instance, let's say, for instance, that what I lay claim to is true, that I can feel energy. And when you connect to, I can stand, and let's say that, I'm not psychotic, but it actually happens for me that I can stand next to people who are ill and I can feel their illness within me. I mean, how many people would want that for a start off? You can feel the sick. This is why I avoid built up places, because you're absorbing, once you're connected to this force, you will feel it all. And it's not a funny thing. There was a little joke that we had with me and John and a couple of the energy workers we work with. Who wants to be the King of Kings? And nobody wants to be the King of Kings, because it is that as soon as you connect to you connect to what we are. You see, this is why I don't believe that all these people who claim to be enlightened are actually enlightened. Because if they were connected to the field, they'd be talking about the headaches that they get in the pineal gland. They'd be talking about the restriction from the throat that they get when they stand next to people. And they would be talking about vomiting when they're ripping energy, because the senses of the gut, and Clifford High has talked enough about it, and the senses in the gut make you want to spew up. So if these people were connected to people, they would then be out in the woods. Because you're constantly ripping. Once you have that ability to connect to those energy fields, your energy fields then rips the negative energy from people. People feel better when they meet you, and the individual who is the energy worker feels worse. This is why most of the energy workers of today don't live very long.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's many stories of these people who work with energy who died at 50 or 40 or 55 because they're just ripping this energy off other people, converting it within them, if they can convert it within themselves, but generally it's held within their own energy field. And it burns you out.
Okay.
So for the change to occur, we have to all do it together. And this connection to the field, the connection to the oneness, has its price. You know, nobody would want to be the King of Kings if they really realized. And I'm not talking about being nailed to crosses, which is the wrong kind of concept. Anyone who can work with this energy will feel it. You know, when you become connected, but when the field itself becomes purified from the outside energy, from outside our solar system, mankind, it's like we're in a goldfish bowl whose water hasn't been changed for many, many thousands of years.
Yeah, I know a Qigong master, and she said, Paul, that she wouldn't heal anybody because if she does do a healing, she's got to go out into the forest for like 3 months and meditate and purge the energy. So she said she just doesn't do it. She won't do it. She refuses. Yeah,
well, I mean, it's, you know, sometimes I will, I convert energy. There's one that's crossed my path. Then, she was supposed to have her eye out, tumor removed, and blah blah blah, and all something. Yeah, you take a license off. I can't drive. You know, we're going to open your head and take the tumor out, and you know, and I've been working with this one person, and yeah, she's driving now, and it's funny, but of course it's at a cost. And all the energy workers, the true energy workers who don't use mind energy. Because the thing is most people are tapping into Archangel Gabriel or this, that, and the other. And of course, that if you knew what the cherubim and seraphim were actually describing from the original ancient text, then you wouldn't see them as personified humans. So you know that. Sorry, yeah.
Paul, I got a question on this, and that is the balance between these negative pollution type things like chemtrails or Fukushima, or just the junk coming out of Chinese factories. Have you seen some evidence for how that plays out with orbs?
Well, I think the new energies that are refreshing, the purifiers, the purification energy, over time will change the whole planet. I mean, I think that these things are just, I think it's like the last throws of the dice for the old paradigm. I think that the world has seen maybe not the technology that we've brought to date. There's not really great evidence for the technology that we have, but the ages that the Kali Yuga suggests, and many of the other Hopi and whatever suggest that man have been around for a long time, and so we shouldn't. Our psychosis, it means that we hate nature. With the disconnection, we want to control nature. We want to teach monkeys how to smoke cigarettes. I don't know what we want to do, but it's like as though we hate the very thing. I wanted to start with this. Can I just tell you a little story?
Sure, go for it.
Right. I was listening to a program on Channel 4, BBC, and it was about cells within the human body, and it's a science program, and they were talking about one cell in 10 in the human body is human. And I was listening to this. I was thinking, this is fascinating research now. So nine of your cells, living cells in your body, are microbes, which are not of human origin. They're things that have come in through your digestive system, through breathing. And so 1 in 10 of your cells are just human. And the question is, at the end of this interview, they were talking, and they brought on a Taoist monk, is it? Taoist monk. And he said, we know the adage, I think, therefore I am. And he said, but that's actually not true. He said, what we really should be looking at, and he said, my microbes are, therefore I exist, or therefore I am. You are a system of things that are not you. And he ended the conversation by, he said, let me improve on what I've just said. The earth is, therefore I am. I exist in this living environment as part of it. And we have been living on this earth in this age as though we're not part of it. And once we have to return back to the communion with nature. And I don't mean flogging around naked, you know, I'm in this, the contact with nature itself.
Well, Paul, you can see how the powers that be, though, are trying to go to the, you know, the maximum in the other way. They are trying to create mega cities with these, in the States it's called Agenda 21, but the idea is smart cities, smart grids, right? They want a totally artificial living environment.
Well, they want us all, you know, this divide and conquer and the separation of each individual from his brothers and sisters, the separation of families. They don't want families living together as units. They don't want a family unit. They want you to be working so hard that not only, you know, in my grandmother's day, only one person needed to work to fund a house. Now you have to have 4 or 5 people to fund a house. Everyone's working so hard they have no time. You know, our productivity rates have grown out of all proportion. We've got the mechanistic age, you know, where robotic machines can replace thousands of people and we still work longer hours. I mean, that is their own, this is the powers that be in their own insecurity. And to be honest, that I have no hatred for these people because they are just my brothers and sisters who have become sicker than most. You know, they have no reverence to life. They have reverence to power. They have reverence to oil. They have reverence to the things that the control over their brothers and sisters. But that is, you could take the majority of the New Age movement and place them in those positions of power, and they would behave exactly the same as the Illuminati.
That is the problem.
You know, it's a problem. Yeah.
Then there's that theory, like the Gnostic idea of the archons, that that it's kind of like a spiritual virus, that because people have become so weak, these things have taken over. And I don't know if that's the case, but it certainly looks like when you add it all up that we're in a Kali Yuga of a combination of factors, and that it makes these, call them spiritual parasites or whatever you want to call them, it makes these bad tendencies really dramatically get worse.
Well, to be honest, I think that with a low magnetic field, the Kali Yuga is the time of the demon or the demon possession or the male demon or demonic forces. And I think that, you know, it's sort of on the head. You know, if you believe that there is an entity possession of these occultists who you know, these people are using what is what was meant to be, it was hidden because it was persecuted. The energy worker was sort of went underground, and now they use it for personal power and call it demonic forces. to guide them through, and give them power. I mean, Moses was asking whatever his God was to win a battle for him. Now, it either is God, in which God wants to slaughter all the Canaanites or whoever he was fighting at the time, or it's something else that's given him power. And I think that the Kali Yuga describes it adequately when it talks about it's the age of the demon forces, or demonic forces, or the male demon.
Well, we're in agreement on that.
Hey, Paul, Daddy Bob here. I was reviewing one of your Nat Taru videos, and you mentioned that you saw, you had a vision of a bull dying, and you figured out that related to the explosion that became the Crab Nebula.
Yeah.
Correct? Okay, so I got that correct.
Can I add a little bit to that? Because we were standing at a megalithic site called Cerrig Duon, and I was asked the questions, what do you think this site was all about in terms of energy? Because I'm a sensitive, so I could feel the energy flowing through me. I don't use the intellect, I use just the flow of energy. But what occasionally flashes through your mind is pictures. They're like digital still pictures. And what I saw was a bull being killed. And we left the site, and I said, it's to do with a star dying in Taurus. So on the way, we were going to a second megalithic site, and both of us knew basic Welsh. And as we were passing a village called Tree Castle, I said, "Where are you taking us to, Peter?" who was the doctor of geology that we were with at the time. And he said to me, Nant Taru. And of course, both of us have a broad understanding of Welsh, understood it as the stream from Taurus. Now, only half an hour earlier I was talking about a dying bull and what happens when a nebula is formed is that particles will explode from that and stream from the constellation. And so what we instantaneously, or at least I instantaneously knew, the Nant Taru effect is the stream from the bull.
Okay, are you at all familiar with Danny Wilton's work, Orion in the Vatican?
Orion seems to feature in a lot of things, and the
I noticed that you had said that in that video.
Yeah, the Orion correlation is more to do with there's a triple henge in Great Britain called Thornborough Henge. They call it the Stonehenge of the North, or the Henge of the North, the Stonehenge of the North, and it's Thornborough Henges. It's got two aligned circles and one offset, and you've got stone circles in this Orion type of configuration called the hurlers, which are two in line, one offset. You've got three megaliths standing in a site called Harrow Stone, which is near Trellick, in Wales, that is. And they're the three stones, two aligned, one offset. So I believe that the geometry of Orion is probably just the geometry which occurs from the field itself.
He brings up some things like that. What I'm really driving at is that he is discovering that the energy, the consciousness in the Orion Nebula was influencing artwork 100 years before the discovery of the Orion Nebula by telescope, before anyone ever saw it. And so what I'm driving at is, I'm wondering, did you intersect a similar stream of consciousness from the Crab Nebula? And I would have to go back to Walter Russell's statement that the nebula are God's recording devices. So you take it from there.
Yeah, it's an interesting concept, And I don't want these things to be either supernatural or whatever, because I'd rather have an understanding of these things. So I'm going to sort of jump away from that and give you an explanation of something I used to do while I was training a young lad to use energy. We would take 3 spoons. I would place a certain type of energy into each of the spoon, because then you're looking at 3 identical spoons. They look absolutely the same. I then ask an individual to put a hand over it and to name the first thing that pops into their mind. Now, I'll just give you an example. I put into one jealousy or sibling rivalry. And one of the people who I was testing with this to see what they would see named his brother. The other one, I placed love in it. He named his mother. Fear, one of the people who was beaten by his father, fear was his father. So I said, "Oh, you're frightened of your father, are you?" So this energy actually is a teacher. Like, these people are just putting their hands over a spoon and saying, "Oh, I see my dad in that." Well, he's recognizing the fear that I've placed. You can place energy into objects. Energy workers will tell you that. They place the healing energy, but using this intent is not a good thing. And, it's certainly not someone who has not learned about their own ego. It's a dangerous thing for them to be even messing with. But so I see these pictures, like you can psychologically give people a pile of pictures and they can give you a response to them. So what is that in the human condition? Well, is it connecting to something at a distance? Is it the presence of the energy? All I know is it happens. It happens for ordinary people.
Well, that's going somewhere where I wanted it to go. Do you think this megalithic structure where you saw the bull being killed, do you think that someone infused that structure with a prophecy of the explosion that created the Crab Nebula?
You see, I was kicked off an astronomy forum, and my thread on the megalithic forum, on one of the megalithic forums, is the longest running thread on that archaeological forum. It's got over 101,000 hits on that thread, and I talked to them about the Nantaro effect. I talked to them about how you can find paired split stones, and I think that these. I think there's a connection between all things. I mean, have you heard of on that forum they criticised me by saying, well, the Crab Nebula in the Bronze Age could not have been seen because the light would take 5,000 years to get there, and the light from the Crab Nebula occurred in 1054. Mm-hmm. And that was recorded by the Chinese and a number of other people, where there were 2 suns in the sky, right? Because of the light from the Crab Nebula.
Okay.
But in the latest research quantum field, which I believe is a fractal of the universe, not a quantum aspect, there's 2 aspects of this, which means that the particle could already be here at the same time it occurs. One is an entanglement, where 2 particles are entangled. One remains in the Crab Nebula, the other arrives at say South Wales at the Nantaro Song Circle, right? And when supernova occurs, the additional energy is added to the entangled particle, which remains in the Crab Nebula, and the entangled particle, which is now over the skies of South Wales. automatically that particle, because it's got additional energy added to it, would have the energy added to the entangled particle in South Wales.
Uh-huh.
So that is one effect that we've seen in quantum entanglement that could happen. Also, if any of these particles are related to each other, you could have a thing which is another quantum experiment called quantum teleportation. Quantum teleportation occurs, and it is even occurred in matter. They've managed to achieve this with atoms now, not just like photons, atoms. And what happens is you destroy the existing, and you can broadcast that atom to another place. So as long as there's an association with that atom or photon, so let's say that the photons now 10,000 years ago have taken 5,000 years to get to South Wales, then the Crab Nebula explodes, and all the atoms in that Crab Nebula are decreated. They could appear over Britain or over the skies of the UK or over the skies of this Earth instantaneously. It's like the in and out particles that are talked about. So for anyone to say, well, it can't travel faster than the speed of light, it can under the laws of quantum mechanics.
Yeah.
And it can under the laws of entanglement and quantum teleportation. So...
There's also the fact that these... we don't really know whether everything is a constant. We're told the speed of light is this, that, or the other.
Yeah.
But we're not really sure. If you went out in the galaxy, we're stuck here in a very small area.
Well,
the local effects of gravity or magnetism might be,
the
other thing, of course, is are things electrical? Then there's the whole electric universe question, and then
go
ahead.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Let's take Sheldrake's work, for instance, on the variable speed of light, how it changed by 20 meters per second. I don't know whether you've read his book, the Science Set Free or the Science Delusion.
I've watched some videos of him talking about it, but haven't read it yet.
Well, what he talked about is obviously he was looking at the cosmological constants, and I can tell you about the physics lecture that I was in the other day, talking to one of the professors who receives data from CERN, and but what Sheldrake noticed was that the speed of light altered from 1938 to 45. It dropped by 20 or slowed by 20 meters per second. Now, this fits in with another thing that, which is the ether theory, which will take far too long to explain. But what was happening between 38 and 45, we were undergoing major nuclear testing, and we had 2 nuclear bombs. So this radioactive increase of radiation was actually altering the speed of light or the equipment that we use to measure the speed of light. These cosmological constants are nonsense. Let's take and this is what I put to this physics professor, who I say takes data from CERN. I said to him, at the point of Big Bang, let's just assume everything's running at the same speed, so everything then zooms off at the same speed, and then matter slowly forms, so it slows down. It has to slow down to coalesce and form matter. So the distance, this after 2 light years, let's say that the matter is slowed down by half a light year, so it's moved at 1.5 light years. It would be apparent to all the other matter in the universe that the light is accelerated because everything else is slowed down. So for light to have its constant speed, it must be accelerating in relation to what it's measuring, because everything else is slowing down. Now, because we don't observe light slowing down in terms of in relation to the Big Bang, which all matter is slowing down, it has to coalesce. Does light slow down in proportion to the rate of slowing of the material world? you've got to have a distance to measure to test that cosmological constant. And of course, there's no way to measure that. It just can't be measured. It's like, it's just one of those things. Well, is light slowing down? The other thing is when you get each of the atoms, right? Each of the atoms are bound together by the strong and weak nuclear force. Let's call it charge, for instance. So all these atoms are now bound to another atom by charge. They're all bound to another atom by charge. And, we see things like skyscrapers. They're all bound together by charge. Animals like a whale or a giraffe is all bound together by its charge. All its atoms stay together, the integrity of all those things. So these objects now are all binding at the Big Bang, together by charge. And all of a sudden, planets form. Gravity suddenly appears from nowhere and drags and matter stops being bound together by charge, which it doesn't because it's still bound together by charge. And gravity forms planets. I mean, it's like something out of a fairy story. Can you see where I'm coming from with that?
Yes, for sure. Personally, I have a lot of questions about mainstream physics, and so I like to, look into things like the electric universe theory and other such ideas, because I think electricity and magnetism are hundreds of millions or billion, well, more than that, hundreds of trillions of times stronger as forces go than gravity, and so I think we have been brainwashed into thinking about gravity all the time instead of electricity and magnetism. But that's just my own personal.
Well, the ether theory of Loretz was ether binding onto I think it was ether binding onto the electron to alter its orbit. Mm-hmm. The electron's orbit, which makes it look like a gravity effect, but it's not. It's just the increase of the three particles of was I talking about now the electron? of it not being a fundamental particle anymore? It's something that, it's probably for a later time, but the electron is no longer a fundamental particle, and it was never, it was a particle and a wave. But these things just get too heavy for to understand, how they work.
Paul, I've got a related question. Some people have the idea, and I guess it comes from the old Indian or Jain philosophy of the constant, continuous creation and destruction model of the universe. And so I guess I'd get your take on that. Does this fit in with your idea? I mean, could orbs simply be, matter going in and out of existence?
I mean, that is... as far as I'm concerned, there's no such thing as a black hole. They're
I'm with you on that.
They're mythological. They are these are places where energy is created, and so it's the points of creator in and out breath. I mean, if you want to call it that, it's the place where matter is made, and I think there's enough. If you have a look at Halt Narp's work on the quasi-stellar objects and peculiar galaxies, he suggests that quasars are made from the insides of spiral galaxies. And these spiral galaxies are the places where energy comes into the universe and spins out of the universe, whether you want to call them electromagnetic phenomenon. But that's what we're told by the Anuna Elish. The Anuna Elish tells us that there was a spin in the sky, and there was a spin in the earth before the earth was formed. So the ancients knew that there was a spinning, the spinning heavens occurred before any matter occurred. And out of that spin was spun the material and also the orb. I mean, this is the spin of the sun. It is where orbs can be created or absorbed. And also the energy that they carry can be delivered. Delivered into the sun and delivered from the sun. So I see these as points on a field of energy. all the ancient art, all the very ancient art. I'm not talking about the modern stuff. I'm talking about the very most ancient art. The Star of David, the swastika, are all depicting what the energetic field does. This is the energetic, the field of energy which creates everything. And from that flows the out-breath and in-breath of energy itself. Continuous creation, absolutely. So, you're spot on.
Well, I have a related question. In your book, when you're talking about the I Ching and the patterns in it, and you have a sketch of kind of a little hard to describe. It almost looks like a 3-story box of the wave patterns in it. Have you done any more on this since your book was published? Do you have any further details on that?
Well, when I was mapping the Earth field, it's like an AutoCAD drawing with a picture of a wave on it or something like that, is it?
Yes.
Yeah. Was it like line drawings, all different colors, lines, and it looked like geometric patterns on the base of it?
Well, I don't know about the colors because I printed it out in black and white when I read it.
Right.
But a lot of them were 3 lines together, some wavy, some straight, some with breaks, and then you have an I Ching explanation.
Yeah, well, basically that's the once you get these fields of energy on and off, when they meet up, and when there's a break-in, and when there's a hole in the energy field, it sort of creates an outpouring of a bar or outpouring of a rod or whatever you want to call it. This is how I see it. So they would have to be like trickle-fed energy fields that are sort of like a jelly mold. I think I referred to them as jelly molds, where they hold the thing solid, and out of it comes energy.
Mm-hmm.
I think that when you get the 3 bars together, they'll just pop off the field. It needs, because we're talking of the primordial substance of creation now, it is very, very difficult. I remember when I first found, by mapping the field, the paired split stones, I found the tiny little notches at the bottom of the megalith, and I followed them for like a quarter of a mile until I came across what I was looking for. And these ancients, what they were mapping is the mapping of the flow of energy on the earth from one place to another. The width bands of it are depicted by the widths of the stones. Some of the stones are offset, and all of this is part of the field which goes to making the bar and the wave. This field is a geometric field which is imprinted on the floors of churches, which is imprinted on flags, which is remembered through the mythology, which some do not see the shape-changing dragon as anything other than some sort of mythology. Well, to me, a bar of energy traveling through methane, like the balloon that I gave an analogy, can pick up methane. Let's take the Tunguska event. There was a hollow tube seen in the sky. One of the bars. One of the bars now is electrically charged, which electrifies methane or hydrogen into its core and explodes and wipes the forestry down. You know, like the recent Russian orb, which had picked up some of the inflammable gases and exploded and fused some of the dust particles that it was dragging with it over Russia and blew out the windows and blew out the tops of the thing. That is not a meteorite.
That was not a meteorite?
No, it was an electrified orb with gas inside it. It was one of the predictions. I was making these predictions. More fireballs will occur. You know, they'll explode in the sky. I mean, it's electrified hydrogen. If you imagine that, I got some videos where I rub a balloon on my head, I put it over some washing powder, it sticks to it, you can see then the white washing powder. But you imagine an electrified orb coming into a field of methane or hydrogen. Okay. You know, and picking up, because of its charge, it can charge hydrogen to its core. As it enters into the atmosphere and heats up, any of the other charged particles become fused. So they look like little bits of stone that are falling. But it's just a burning orb. I mean, this is what
I got a question then. Okay, so have you seen that somewhat famous video where the meteorite or orb or whatever is coming down in Siberia, and it looks like, a pulse weapon or something essentially shoots it and breaks it up?
Well, I've seen that firing up the tips of the megalithic stones. On one of the videos that I put up, you get that little firing out of the tip of the stone, which is firing out a bar. Now, whether that was man-made or whether it was, but that is quite natural to me, because I've seen it that in the 50 sequence of photographs that I took of the tips of the stones firing out, it's a pretty poor video, but you can make it out if you slow it down, that it fires out of the tip of the stone, and it looks very, very much the same as what was fired out of the orb. So,
wait a minute. When you say fired out of the orb, to most of us looking at the video, it looked like the ball is coming down at a very fast speed, and then something from far away on the ground at a low angle comes up and blows it up. Or, at least the video I'm referring to.
Well, what I remember, it came out the front of it, but there's no problem because if you watch some of the sun videos, you'll see bars going into the sun and causing an eruption in the sun. I put one of those up the other day. The bar comes into the sun, it causes a disturbance in the sun, and there's a CME or whatever they want to call them, but it hits the sun, and then the sun has an energetic effect. So the charge of the orb now is attracting a bar. If it comes in from underneath it, now I'm not saying that none of these things are absolutely certain. But what I can say is I have data that I could show you that would look similar to it firing out of the tip of a megalithic stone. And I also have data which shows a bar entering into the sun and causing the effect. It would take me some time to find it all because I got so much of it.
No, that's okay. But I guess what I'm saying then is you would say that there are, for lack of a better term, then there are two kinds of meteorites. There's the one we're taught in school, which is
that hits the ground.
That hits the ground and leaves a bunch of rocks all over the place.
That's right, and you can pick them up and you can go
sell them and buy them at a rock store.
Right. Yeah.
Right? Okay, and then there's the kind that does not really have very much mass in it at all.
It's electrified plasma.
It's a plasma, and that it's really related to orbs?
Yeah.
Or it's that the orbs respond to it as it comes in?
No, the orb is the carrier of energy, whether it be hydrogen, this is the difficult part, or a human soul. These are the difficult things, you see. But I cannot, in anything that I say, deny the fact that the human soul travels in a sphere back to its ascension. But it's not the same as hydrogen. This is why the all-bar wave is such a complex process of energy that I have to, and I hate the conclusion of it. If I wasn't so honest, I could deny this. Do you know what I mean? Because it would be possible for science to come on board.
They don't want to hear that, right?
That's right. So even in the book, it's sort of like, I don't want to talk about it. But I know it to be true. I know it to be true.
Well, let's get into the more mainstream bit for a couple minutes, and then we can get to the soul of the matter, so to speak. But from a mainstream point of view, then, so you would suspect that some of the historical events that we think happened, like Tunguska, or perhaps, are you familiar with the Carolina Bays?
I'm not, but they're like dimples, aren't they? And round holes, aren't they?
Yes, in the United States, going up from supposedly offshore, like off the coast of South Carolina, Florida, and then there are thousands or tens of thousands of these moving up towards the Great Lakes area.
Right. So you imagine, I'll just give you a scenario now, right? Loads of orbs, right, picking up hydrogen. We've got methane, let's call methane, all right? Methane released because there's been a period of warming. Lots of methane in the early formulation of the planet. Orbs then picking up this electrified methane, and, so it's an orb cloud. Mm-hmm. Lightning strikes it, they fall into the floor, they explode, they cause all these loads of little round holes. Would that explain it?
Yeah. I mean, I think they talk about electrical bolites and other things at different times, right? And so, in other words, the speculation in the mainstream would be kind of plasma, electrical plasma.
Yeah. Well, and which what is an orb, really?
And from your point of view, that's an orb. And by the way, for those who aren't aware, the Carolina Bays. Let's just put it that way. When they got formed, it was a bad day to be within, 10,000 kilometers or something, because, it could have been the flooding of biblical times or Atlantis. It was that dramatic an event, because we're talking about tens of thousands of fairly large indentations in the ground, and if it hit offshore as well, which is the mainstream thinking, it would have totally flooded, the east coast of North America and the Caribbean and northern South America. So people might want to look into that if they're interested. But that's kind of, I suppose, the interesting thing, by the way, is there really aren't any residues of rocks. You see, that's the point.
No.
It's been smashed, but there's nothing there.
Well, they're hydrogen or methane explosions.
Right. And do you speculate that's the same for Tunguska?
Well, Tunguska was obviously the first-hand account was one of the eyewitnesses saw a tube, which is one of the bars. All right, so one of the bars now, or rod, right, is now full up of methane or hydrogen. It becomes electrified because of the process of electrification of the spinning tube. And it explodes, and that to me is simply part of the orb fugolite theory, right? Right? Have you ever seen monoliths on Mars? Have you ever seen these tall structures? There's one on Mars. It's about 7.2 kilometers high. It looks like a tall building, Right, so you imagine now you've got one of these bars now, rather than the orb. You have to understand that the orb converts into a bar. Right. Now the orb, can you still hear me?
Yes.
Hello?
Yes,
right.
I can hear you.
Yeah, the orb, when it hits the orb, when it is freed from the binds of strong magnetic fields, moves quicker and changes form into a bar. And I got video on that as well at a megalithic stone stone burial mound, so-called burial mound called Arthur's Seat or Arthur's Stone. What happens is the orb, once it's freed from strong energy fields, becomes a tube. And it converts, and these are the primordial steps and conversions, that many people won't understand until you took them by the hand, showed them the evidence, piece by piece by piece, and then they could build a picture. So the orb converts into a bar. right? So now you imagine the sausage balloon now, right? And I rub it with my hair. That represents the charge that the balloon picks up. You cover it up with flour. You strike it with lightning, and all of a sudden it becomes hard material. Fused material to the surface of the bar. The bar then tilts, falls to the earth, and implants it, well, not to the earth, but to the surface of Mars, and you get a monolith on Mars. And, you know, the same thing happens with the spheres and the golf ball crater. So in the early days, I was predicting that in places where there would be magnetic fields, there would also be spheroids on the surface of the planet, and also tall rods and bars stuck into the planet also, like chucking a chopstick at Mars. Now, they exist. Now, I was predicting them before even Voyager. I spent some time with Spirit and Rover looking at the images that came through. There's a Bonstella panorama where there's one of these stone spheres balanced on top of rocks. There's obviously the golf ball crater, which people believe to be a geodome. But you know, I make the prediction and I can find them because I understand the all-bar wave. I'm not. Do you know what I mean? So, you know, you make the prediction and they're there. You keep making the predictions.
Well, that used to be called science, but
yeah. Well, you look at Hathaway's predict. You know, the contraction of the sun. So it's gone from yellow to white. I think everyone is aware of that now, and there's a reason why I joined Time Monk. Or the Webbot forum was because of Cliff's The Sixth Sun. The only other person at the time who was talking about the potential, which we're in now, was a chappie called Maurice Cottrell, and I wrote to him, and have you heard of him, Maurice Cottrell?
Sure.
Yeah, I wrote to him, and he just, I sent him over a copy of the book, but he couldn't grasp. I was trying to find out about his ideas on the output of the sun and particle charge, but I couldn't quite get him to understand what I was seeing. But you know what I'm seeing explains why the ice at the North Pole is defrosting and the ice at the South Pole is increasing, and why the temperature at the South Pole of the Sun is lower than the North Pole of the Sun. You know, and why, you know, it's a magnetic cooling field in the particles and charge. I mean, you know, why hasn't Mars got its North Pole and its North Pole? You know, why is its cold spot offset? Well, that's all to do with magnetic cooling and nothing to do with angular tilt away from the sun, which is a linear
I think most of our listeners are going to agree that the whole model is, what shall we say, intentionally designed to mislead us.
Well, that's right, and
it's not the angular tilt. That's not the story at all. It's much more issues like the magnetic flow. Yeah, and so I have a question. Have you got any ideas on the auroras or anything like that to do with orbs? I mean, is that part of the...
Yeah, well, that is because a lot of what is showing up are the electrification of orbs in the Aurora Borealis in Australia. You know, I think the northern and southern lights, you can see these particles in photographs, you know, so-called particles, but it's illumination of I believe what is some of it is from our sun and some of it is from outside our solar system. And the majority is flowing from outside our solar system to recharge our magnetic field, the sun's magnetic field, and re-energize our solar system itself. You know, it's if you imagine a spinning orb now, and there's a thing called spin charge separation. So it spins, it has one charge on its outside and a charge on the inside. This is why the samples that I have, that I cut down and put on the SEM and stuff like that, are hollow, because the outside charge is one thing and the inside charge is another. So it will repel things from the inside to the outside, depending on which way the charge is. So you imagine a spinning orb now has this charge on its outside. its charge attracts to one pole. Let's say it's attracted to the North Pole. Some of that charge is ripped off. And in ripping that off, its internal charge now, which is opposite to the pole, repels it off the pole. This is why the mammoths were blast frozen in a magnetic repelling effect. So this particle now is repelled off the North Pole. It meets the borderlines and causes spin, which causes the weather from space. So we get spin on the equator, and these spinning particles are the reason, and cosmic rays are now being, and I think I mentioned this earlier, are now being attributed to the weather on this Earth. Spinning orbs. I mean,
so do you think that we can measure this in terms of weather, like cyclones and things like that?
Well, this is in 3100. The weather fluctuated tremendously. They had dry periods, wet periods, and I don't think anyone can doubt that we've got the same thing. And we're talking about this 5,000 1/4 precessional cycle, and at the start of that 1/4 precessional cycle, we had weather interference, rising sea levels, drought, so and so, and we're having the same now. So what was happening then? Well, we've got a solar minimum now. The Mayans hit that pretty good. It's the quietest sunspot. They reckon it's the quietest sunspot period for 200 years. If you then did a correction, how many telescopes have we got looking at the sun? How many telescopes have we got in space looking at the sun? How many more chances can we see the rear side of the sun and the sunspots? There's a 28-day revolution of the sun. Have we added sunspots to the current data that we could never see before? If you took those out, could we have the quietest sunspot cycle of all time?
Well, I don't know, but I'll put it this way. I would assume that the powers that be and folks like NASA would never tell us the truth about anything, really.
No, they wouldn't.
So if anything were risky or dangerous, they most certainly wouldn't tell us unless they had a very good reason for driving an agenda. So I don't trust them. I mean, I don't trust any of their models, and that's one of the problems when we discuss stuff from the solar system or photos on Mars. I trust the European Space Agency more than the U.S.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't. I mean, I think that we just got to say that they control the data. I mean, there's a thing called the Helio Viewer, right? And NASA control that. My IP address is blocked from it because I've been putting pictures of orbs and following them. You can make movies of them and download them. My IP address is blocked from viewing them. They take frames out of them, and yet if I go to my other IP addresses where I work in the university, I can see them, and then they'll come back online again.
Well, Paul, I've had that happen with lots of kind of technical sources that were available maybe 10 or 15 years ago on the Internet. And things like atmospheric stuff, infrared tomography, all kinds of things was available for serious scientific research.
Yeah.
And it came out of quasi-military environments like Monterey, California, or allied facilities around the world. LIDAR, the laser version of radar, some of that research. And it's all hushed up. You can't get anything anymore.
Yeah.
And I would say that until they stopped, you could just about prove a major experiments going on by the U.S. military or NATO or whatever on a worldwide scale, just because, and or possibly major Earth changes. And by that, I'm not saying everything's melting. I didn't say Greenland's ice sheath was melting. I'm just saying that things that were not the norm were being analyzed, and you could see it easily, like temperature gradients in the oceans in different areas and things like that.
Well,
and now it's much, much harder. If you don't have a password, you can't get into these things.
No, that's right. That's right. And they can censor whoever, they see an IP address. I mean, there's an interesting one I was talking to my wife about, and she's really down to earth, level-headed and whatever. Because I make no money out of anything, I put these things up for nothing, and to be successful in a corrupted system is no credit to a man who's seeking the enlightenment of one's soul. So that money really doesn't matter. But because there were a number of adverts appearing on my YouTube channel, I thought, well, I may as well get paid for them, right? You know about the adverts that appear on YouTube. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So anyway, I started that although I've been a YouTube member from 2007, I think it is, or maybe not. I can't remember the dates. It's a number of years anyway. And so I thought, I'll just earn some money, for these hits. So that started about January of this year. I decided to do it because I could have 60 quid, for a year's worth of hits, or something. It's not going to be major, but it's a little bit of money that helps, helps along, So for all the days I have a monetary value, of like 1 cent or as much as 20 cents per day, something like that. But on the day of my birthday, the whole data is missing. Now that doesn't happen by chance, I put my birthday on there, and it's just like telling you, we're going to take this one piece of data out and tell you that we are watching you.
Paul,
it's like, there isn't out of 365 days, and the only day is your birthday that's missing.
Paul, don't you think there's, I don't know if you want to call it a Men in Black kind of thing, but there's something above the normal level of government that we think of that's aware of things and does things in certain ways that are hard to understand, and they're just kind of giving us the message, I think.
Well, they do act as, they act to warn you, that, someone could say, oh, well, it's just the paranoia or whatever. My birth date is missing. Is that chance? I don't think it's chance. Why does the helio viewer all of a sudden lose frames that I've been watching for weeks? But this is, you see, the trouble is...
We're in the Kali Yuga, Paul.
We're in the Kali Yuga. Can you blame them? They really need to come down to my house, or all the Illuminati, although I wouldn't get them in here because it's only a tiny little pokey old house. But they could come down here and have a cup of tea, and we could all talk about their own psychosis and what we can do to heal them. What steps...
They need it. They need it. But they do seem possessed,
Well, that's right. The demonic forces that enter into people, and people don't really think that that's a possibility. It's I've seen firsthand of it. I know. I'm in my world. That's a reality, and every single diocese in Great Britain has an exorcist. And I used to sell to the churches when I was in my salesman mode, or when I used to design offices and stuff like that. I worked in business equipment and office interiors, and I met the exorcist for I won't name the parish, but there's a parish not so far away from me, and nobody, well, would you say that these people believed in it? Well, he certainly did. I certainly do. I believe that people can be possessed. I
think we can see it all around us. What do you mean? And also I think that the television and cinema are becoming more obviously of that dark nature.
Well, it's everything. Who was it? There was some chap who was criticised by making slushy films, right? I think he was interviewed on British TV recently, and he said they criticised him for not making a realistic film. And his response was, I know many people who have fallen in, this is paraphrasing now, not the actual quote. He said, I know many people who have lost a loved one. I know many people who have loved and lost. I know many people who have fallen in love and remained in love for all of their life. He said, I don't know many people who have gone out with a Kalashnikov and killed thousands of people or blown up people. So he said, and I'm criticised for making unrealistic films, just because he was just painting what his kind of experience of life was in a film. Well, he won a couple of Oscars for it. I wish I remembered the film. And this is what we're fed. We're fed, I don't know many people who've gone out and killed more than 10 people. In fact, I can't be certain. I know of one person who was in the army who killed some people, but that's left him traumatized, and I only know him through his trauma. Do you know what I mean? But I don't know all these people who go around murdering people. I don't know many people who are quite happy to go and murder all these people. That's what we're fed.
That's true. By the way, Paul, since we're on this, why don't we ask, because I know a lot of people are curious about whether there's a way to use orb energy or some of the related things to basically make their lives better, health or emotional stability, whatever.
Yeah, I think it's more of a two-way thing. I think if you imagine that let's say there are many energy fields on the Earth. You can walk into them, you can stand into them, and they can flow through you. They can only flow through you once firstly you can sit in these places of high energy and let it be absorb, and you will, through conduction of energy, conduct the orb into you. It will come into you. But you do need to do a bit of work yourself on blockages. People who have a blocked energy field are resistant and do not absorb this energy, and will absorb more like I think it's a karma rule, isn't it? Like attracting like. Is that like karma?
Well, I wouldn't. That's the law of attraction that people talk about. I'm not sure if I would call that a karma. Mm-hmm.
No. The law of attraction. So that if you're suffering, you will bring suffering to yourself. So you have to work on the purification of yourself to allow this process. Now, being in places of high energy will help you and help you bring that charge which will attract the positive change in your life. So it will attract, but you see many of these. Let's talk about women are classic. They were beaten or they see a man beat a woman. They see the husband beat the wife, or the wife beat the husband. I don't want to stereotype anything. And then in the morning, oh, I love you. And so that young child watching that situation thinks that someone who beats someone loves them. And then they go into every single relationship wondering why someone beats them, when it's their pain that attracts them to a man who's going to beat them, or a woman that's going to beat them all the time. The cleansing of that problem is the facing of that problem. The facing of that problem is critical. That is the greatest thing to allow the energy to heal you, is by facing that, getting rid of that residual pain, which allows then the energy to flow to heal you. And part of that requires, it's a bit like flu. You have to go through the hard yards of it to be able to connect to that energy. It may sound strange, but those blockages block us off from connection to each other and to the earth field and to the orb effects.
Paul, can I ask something right quick?
Yeah.
Okay. I have a fair amount of experience with passive healing devices. Particularly, I did a lot of experimentation with Lakosky coils and Lakosky devices several years ago. One thing that I found out that I haven't been able to find from anyone else, but I definitely found that there was a period of 5 days, 2 days before and 2 days after a full moon, when these devices were much less effective, down to the point of not working at all on a full moon.
Yeah.
Do you have any correlation to that with your observation of orb energy?
Well, I was mapping a couple of megaliths over a moon cycle, and to see if I could predict where the ley lines or the energy fields would. It was too complicated for me to be able to map it. But I would agree with you, and what I was recently talking about was that up until the full moon, and this is of a recent observation, you would have a load of more accidents, you'd have car accidents, you'd have people behaving strangely, all sorts of stuff. And then after the full moon, you would see like the pressure come off people, and there'd be less accidents and things, the pressure would sort of come off them with the pull of the moon. But lately, and only lately, and within the last 2 moon phases, I would say, that it appears that there are as many accidents 3 days after the full moon as there were 3 days prior to the full moon. I was always conscious of listening for fire engines, looking at road traffic accidents, because it was always something that I was aware of. I spent a long time driving in my early years. It was something that I noticed as a pattern. It would rise and fall.
I actually noticed that pattern myself. It was actually 3 days before and 3 days after, but it was extremely noticeable at 2 days before and 2 days after.
Yeah, well, I always, around in Britain, it would ease off, but these last 2 moons, and it definitely is the 3 days before, when we used to walk people around the megaliths, if it was 3 days before the moon cycle, we would refuse to take people. Because the energy in those stone circles is non-nice. There were a lot of people, the occultists, your Illuminati wackos or whatever, that they were using the moon for energy for dark forces. And obviously the moon is losing, their ritual, they will find, is not working anymore. Their ritual is not going to hold the energy that the old moon used to do, and there is changes within that moon energy, that moon negative occultist, the sinister occultist effects that the Illuminati seem to be seeking through their own egos and personal power. Their rituals. I mean, I found the pentacles in salt, crushed up beetles, all sorts of little bits of animal, at these megalithic sites. And you think, these people, they leave money at the megalithic sites, right? And these are just the sort of whacked out pagans. Oh, I need more money, and I laugh at it. I mean, this is pristine creation energy of the earth, and they think that money is important, so they leave a gift of money at the megalith. I mean, how stupid can you get? You know what I mean? I mean, do you think the universe values bits of copper and silver? I mean, with the Queen's face on it, or it's
demons
ridiculous.
Might.
Sorry. Oh yeah,
demons.
They will. they certainly do, but of course, anyone talking in terms of demonic forces and possession, is going to get, from the science world or any other world. But these things have a reality to me. I don't need to be a sheep. It's not necessary for me to be a sheep.
Well, I think the reason we're in trouble in society, the broader world is because we're denying the obvious, like these unseen forces that, like in the case of orbs, they're not even really unseen. They're just, we refuse to see them.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting statement there. And I'll give you a little story. There was a printer who was a client of mine, well, when I was in business. And I was doing some of the research at that time. I was just handing over the business to another person. And he said, what's all this business about you doing research into orbs and stuff? And he said, I've never seen them. And he sponsored, because he did embroidery for sports equipment, right? He'd embroidered a set of shirts and he had a photograph hanging on his wall. And I said to him, so you never seen them, have you? And he said, no, I never seen them. And I said, come to this photograph that you've got framed on your wall here. I said, what's that? And he went cold, right? Because he was looking at thousands of orbs over the picture of a rugby team. Right? And he was good. But people, it's amazing, people do not see it. It's like as though their consciousness has told them there is no white dot there, there's no circular orb there.
Well, you have seen the movie They Live, right?
They live. Oh, with the glasses.
Yes.
When he puts on the glasses and everyone changes.
The problem is that people aren't wearing glasses. And so they can't see the fact that all around us there are all these subliminal messages and tricks to make it so we deny the obvious. I mean, well, we were talking earlier in this show. I mean, I find it amazing that anybody could look at somebody like Jimmy Savile and not be repulsed, to be honest. Right? I mean, it's like the story of the vampire. You have to, invite him into your house kind of idea.
You do have to, when people just seem to think, oh, well, it's nothing, I'm just getting drunk or I'm taking a few. You see, the problem I have is that I'm not a prude in any shape or form. But when you drink excessive alcohol, when you take drugs, you open up the doorways and you've got no control of what comes into you. I mean, it's just a stream of, and although people say, oh, well, it was a shamanic experience and whatever, but there are some ancient scriptures writing about these times of change where you have to be diligent and sober within your own self to protect your soul from these forces. I think it was some of the biblical scriptures talk about in times of whatever bullshit they're peddling, but do you know what I mean? I think you really have to be diligent with what you look at. I mean, I was laughing at Cliff's interview the other day about Zecharia Sitchin and the bullshit that they peddled about the Anunnaki and all. I mean, it's just how anyone could have ever fallen for it. I don't know. I mean, it's if anyone had read the Anuna Elish, they would understand, Anu and Ki and the union of Anu and Ki and what they were. I mean, Ki being the earth and Anu being the heavens, and how they were referring to energy fields, not flipping people. I mean, and Ansha and Kisha were the brother-sister gods, which was this earth spin and the sky spin. I mean, the whole thing of it is just so obvious, but we cannot see it. Well, firstly, we've been slowly fed aliens and aliens and aliens and aliens and spaceships and reptiles and aliens and spaceships, and so it's a subtle drip, so that we cannot. And of course, the Babylonians themselves started when they started to forget what they were really talking about, started to depict these gods as human rather than forces. Yeah.
Well, so okay, to put this on a more positive or practical note, what do you see, in terms of developing the orb bar energies for literally practical use? Where's it going? What can we do?
Well, I think that once our tank is cleaned, and that is by the refreshment of the system, we will be purified by that process. And so the people who are psychotic will fade away and die probably. Their psychosis will end, possibly in suicides and just depression and schizophrenia and there will be, part of the purification is going on right this minute. I mean, these pedophiles were never seen before. And all of a sudden, it's like as though the pedophiles are now popping out like sticking out like sore thumbs. They're still not, and I'm not saying the pedophiles do well in prison anyway. I think they really need to be cared for and loved for properly.
Yeah.
They need to,
So, do you have any last points or hints about for the average layperson to absorb, to further along, their own beings in terms of utilizing the orb bar energies?
I think that's a great question, Neil. I think it's the fundamentals of show compassion to the earth, show compassion to yourself, to know yourself, to love yourself, and just live in the simplicity of the moment. Try not to hate too much, because hate doesn't do us any good. And try whatever.
Do you feel you can lap up the orb bar energies like drinking a glass of water, or do you breathe into it?
I think
try to feel it.
I think that working with it and feeling it and feeling the magnetic flows they're easy. They're easy and difficult. I mean, it's a bit like I could show people, if people were close to me, I could show them how to feel the spin from a tree, or feel the push of energy, or to work, or to actually manipulate, like people call them cyballs, and how you spin the energy and you can spin it into creation, and you can use it and you can place it over people's head. I've been able to push people over. In front of a scientist, I moved an object once, but I can't control that. But I mean, those are just tricks.
Right.
I think that yes, you can do those things, and yes, that I would, but it would have to be with, you'd have to spend a lot of time just teaching, firstly, to release themselves from themselves and their own conditioning before you realize what you can achieve with energy. But I think that that's a gradual process that will be like a flower blossoming. I think that as the flow of energy comes in, I've noticed in animals they're more connected to you now than they've ever been. I can think something, my dog will know it. She'll know all sorts of things. My dog put into my mind yesterday, I have no water. I was sitting in the chair, and I never fill a dog bowl, because we have different roles. I take the dogs out, my wife feeds them and waters them. And my dog was in the corner, and she thought my water bowl's empty, and as I stood out, she came out of her basket and walked with me to the water bowl, which I filled up. And that communion is a communion of the field. And that field, I mean, Sheldrake has written about it, but that field is going to intensify. And as that intensifies, we have to prepare ourselves for knowing who's ringing us on the telephone, of knowing who's in trouble, and working with those energetic responses and feelings so that we can respond to them and not ignore them as we have in the past. So I think that those things will occur, that they are occurring in my world, and many people listening, or some people listening, will also have experienced that intensification of the energetic field. They may not express it the same way as I do, but they will have noticed something different happening.
Okay. Thanks, Paul, for everything you gave
Yeah,
here tonight. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Okay,
Wayne?
well, I think we can wrap it up for today. Paul, I'd like to thank you very much for coming and being our special guest. And you have a book and you have a website, things like that. Your book is Orbs, Energy, and Myths, The Secret of the Ancients, right? Is that the title?
That's it, yeah.
Okay,
and,
so people can find that.
They can track me down on the YouTube channel. It comes under PC Muir, or no, not PC Muir, Paul C. Muir at the YouTube account. And there's links to my Facebook page, and there's a number of Google images on that site which will show the similarities between the biological and the orb and the structures of orbs and the many thousands of photographs that I've taken and how the theories fit together.
Okay, well, thanks, Paul, and also thanks to Bob and Neil and Oolong for coming along for the ride.
Yeah, thank you very, very much, everyone. I feel it's important that this is shared because it will make things easier if we have a solar orb event. So thank you, Plain, and thank you, everybody else.
Oh, we appreciate you coming. So thanks, everybody.
All right, thank you.
Take care. Until next week, bye-bye.